Matt Jones, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. We do have a quorum tonight, so we can conduct business. I'll ask the board members to introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Ed Krogolski.
Bill Calmer.
Carol Henry.
Les Fleischer.
And we have Alex Cameron, Planning and Zoning, today with us. Also, Maria, who needs no last name. Welcome everybody here to our meeting today. If there's a member of the public who would like to speak during our public comment period, there is a sign-up sheet in the back, so please take this opportunity to sign up. According to our published agenda, we have the minutes from our February meeting for the Planning and Zoning Board to approve. All board members received a copy. Any comments on the minutes as recorded for the meeting on February 5th? That being the case, does anyone care to make a motion with respect to those minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
I second.
Motion by Bill, second by Les. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved as recorded. The next item on our agenda is the continuation of a public hearing pertaining to a conditional rezoning request for an 8.3 acre property at 4084 Murdochsville Road. I'd look from the board for a motion to re-enter the public hearing.
I move that we close the regular meeting and move back into the open
Let's just re-enter.
public hearing.
Don't close the regular meeting, just re-enter the public hearing.
Then I move that we
Re-enter.
re-enter the public hearing.
Motion by Bill,
Second.
second by Carol. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have now entered back into the public hearing. So from our January meeting, we met, discussed, and gave some feedback to the applicant, asked them to bring us some additional information so we could complete our review of their application, and they have provided that in our packets. So I'll ask staff to give us a brief introduction, and then we'll bring the applicant up to talk and answer questions as well. Maria.
All right, I'm going to give a little recap. We are here for an official zoning map amendment. It's for 8.33 acres of land at 4084 Murdochsville Road. They are proposing to rezone the property from R10, which is high-density residential, to RMFCD, Residential Multifamily Conditional District. That would allow for 37 single-family detached homes with roadways and amenities. And again, the property owner is Moore HL Properties, and the applicant is Travis Green. So in our January meeting, quick recap, we had the hearing, staff did a presentation, then we had public comments, you had a discussion, and then you requested some additional information. That was for some architectural distribution, so you could see how the different elevations would be dispersed throughout the development. Sidewalks along Murdochsville Road, they had that as a condition not to include that, so you wanted some options on actually providing sidewalks there. And then additional parking throughout the development. And there you can see kind of the site plan. Murdochsville Road is here, and you have the roadways with the single-family homes in there, and the open space, and a pavilion for community amenities. So the first thing that they submitted was the architectural distribution. And here you can see they have 3 different colors, which apply to different elevations that they submitted. And those kind of depend on the different lot sizes. So on my next slide, you can see, maybe not. You can see the different colors with the different elevations. So the red areas would be elevations A, B, and C. The blue would be elevations C and D. And then the green would be elevations E and F. So you can kind of see how they're dispersed throughout the development. Then they submitted 3 different options for sidewalks along Murdochsville Road. So the first one You can see they would be proposing to actually have the sidewalk in the right-of-way down along Murdochsville Road. That one would require more removal of trees. The second one would be taking the sidewalk up, and it would lead into their internal sidewalk network, and that would have a smaller area of trees to be removed. And then we have option C, which would be more of a greenway path through the buffer on their property. And they were suggesting that they do more of a sandy trail going through there. So of those three options, staff's preferred option would be option C, but with concrete sidewalks. And then the third thing that you had requested was additional parking. So they've provided in the blue hashed out areas some pine straw parking areas that they could include to allow more people to park there. They do have and exceed the parking requirements, 2 per dwelling unit, and then they have 21 additional on-street parking spaces, but the pine straw would allow further parking. So just to kind of recap the conditions that they were asking for, you'll need to be considering these in your decision today. They were asking for a condition on the width of the streets, the dimensions of the lots. They're asking for smaller dimensions for the lots, as well as the setbacks on the lots. The density, they are actually proposing to keep that the same, so the density is 4.4 units per dwelling, or per acre right now with the R10, and then they're asking to keep that, even though they could go up to 6 with the RMF. Impervious surface, the max is 60%, and they're asking to allow up to 100% on the individual lots, but that would keep the overall development at or below the 60% impervious surface requirement. They're exceeding the open space requirement. They're asking that the buffer yard requirements not be required for each individual lot. The ones that are required around the perimeter of the entire development would still be met. They are asking for a condition to allow trellises into the front setback that would be up to 8.5 feet in height. The max height normally is 3.5 feet. They're asking for the sidewalks within the development, instead of being along the roads, to be in the community areas and the gardens. And then that last condition, number 14, was for them to not have to install a sidewalk along Murdochsville Road. So that is one that you'll definitely need to consider in your motion if you want them to put in that sidewalk along Murdochsville Road. So you'll have to do the public hearing today and review all the material. And then after that, you get to take one of 2 actions. You can either recommend approval to council, make a consistency statement, and then you can recommend denial of the proposal to council and letting us know why that would not be consistent with the comp plan. Staff recommends that you do approve, but with consideration to that last condition there for the sidewalk along Murdochsville Road, that they do install that and with the concrete sidewalks. And we do believe that you should approve it because it is consistent with the 2019 comp plan. There's no change in the use. The density is staying the same as the current R10 zoning. And again, the roads that are proposed will be private and maintenance would be up to the HOA, even though they're not meeting our standards. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Maria. Does the board have any questions for staff at this point? Let's good.
One clarifying question. With the conditions that were presented were the same conditions that we reviewed and discussed in detail previously?
Yes.
No changes?
There's no changes. You might want to consider that last one, though.
Understood. I just want to make sure. Yep.
Okay, yeah, otherwise there were no changes.
Can you go back to the slide that had the green, red, blue colors for the type?
For the sidewalks?
No, the
The pine straw?
architectural,
Elevations, okay.
Yep.
Elevation distribution.
that one. Is it true that C is in both colors, red and blue?
Yes,
Okay. So it's a good mix between those is basically.
I think they were determining that based on the width of the house. You can clarify that with them, but I think that's what that was based on.
Okay, so we will now hear from the applicant, after which we'll use the sign-up sheet to move to our public comment period. So invite the applicant to come back up to the podium. Please reintroduce yourselves. And begin with your, what presentation you may have.
Good afternoon, board members, planning staff, and everyone else in attendance. My name is Trevor Hansen with Kunsch Jones Design V3. We are the land planner and landscape architect for our client and applicant, Travis Green, on behalf of More HL Properties. I don't want to dive too much into the presentation that we've previously done. I do want to kind of recap a couple things before we dive into the new material that we supplied as you had requested. All right, we're all familiar with the site, and we can refer back to anything you guys want in the presentation with any questions you have. But to kind of talk about highlighting some of the things we had talked about in the previous presentation. I think everyone understands what the comprehensive plan showed and what we're proposing, that this is it's a pocket neighborhood. It's something that's not currently, there's no current zoning within the current PDO that allows for this type of development pattern, which is a lot of the reason why we're proposing a conditional zoning. But what I really wanted to kind of highlight is what conditional zoning districts are, and kind of try to hit that home in as succinct a way as possible.
Yeah, it's a good reminder, but yeah, you don't have to go too far down that road.
More just to kind of over what it means and
Sure.
what we kind of see it and why we did it. And then I'll go into items, I'll go through items L 11 through 14, talking about what kind of to give any added details that Marie didn't cover, answer any questions you have, and then talk about those requested conditions. And then I know that we didn't change anything in them, but we wanted to talk about specifically the walking path. Before we put anything in there, we wanted to talk that through with you.
Great.
Get your input before we propose anything. So, yeah, so this is a comprehensive plan, but yeah, again, the cottage pocket neighborhood development, it's inward facing, so it doesn't, the units don't face the street. They face gardens, interior gardens, and then have access onto the street in the back. Similar, fronts and backs may have some similarities, so the rear of the homes would be similar to the fronts in that they would want to be attractive kind of on both sides. This type of development was done quite a bit, especially in Europe before the invention of cars. Cars have standardized developments and made them a little bit more difficult to do these type of development patterns, which is why we're going through, the conditional zoning process. But I guess in a nutshell, what I see the conditional zoning process is we ask for things through conditions, but we also give things in return, knowing that it's kind of a give and take, and a lot of it is us kind of working together. to come up with the best solution, working with planning staff and also, you know, the planning board and hopefully the council in our next future meetings. And so some of the conditions, if you see some of the stuff we asked for reductions in, but then we wanted to offer up certain things that are beyond what the PDO currently states for, in which, you know, open space, you know, potentially commitment to more landscape, which is one of the items we want to discuss, and things like that, you know, and we're exceeding the parking because whatever we have in this plan and whatever is approved through you and through council, we have to adhere to that it's standardized. And it's not something that, I know these conditions we're asking for, we're held to it. It's a different type of process than a straight rezoning. A straight rezoning, you just rezone it over and we just follow whatever's in the code. Whereas this, we're giving you a lot of things that we have to adhere to. And so it's that give and take that I just wanted to reiterate, that we do feel like we're giving you things that some other developers wouldn't want. This process is also, it's a risky process for a developer. This is not something that is typically done by most developers. So I do want to hope that everyone considers that we are doing something that's not the standard, and it would create a unique development. This is not something that could be repeated with other developers. And I can refer back to this stuff as you need it, but wanted to get to the different walking path options. So I'm going to talk about the three options, kind of starting from what we view as the least desirable to the most desirable. So option A, this is the option that we would rather not do. And if you can see in this plan exhibit, the blue lines that I drew in there is grading lines that I actually explored, like what does it take to really install this cart path within the Murdochsville right-of-way. We also met with NCDOT on this. When a sidewalk is along a 45-mile-per-hour road, you have to have a certain distance of recovery off of the road, and that's 16 feet. So we need 16 feet of separation between that sidewalk and the edge of Murdochsville Road, according to requirements. And then we have to deal with stormwater coming off the road, and either we would have to install a curb, which we don't think takes away from that road because it's more of a rural road, or we'd have to put a significant swale to capture drainage. Again, we would be having to push this sidewalk even more into the development and cut more into that slope. The west you go, the more you have to cut into this slope, and I think this exhibit shows, you know, what you'd end up with is a thin sliver of trees, not the sizable buffer that we wanted to have by preserving the existing trees. In addition, we did talk with NCDOT about site distance triangle. So there's a 450 foot site distance triangle off that intersection if we come into that development. We didn't show it in the exhibit that we sent to the village, but we could update this and send it to them. We wanted to explore, okay, what does that site distance triangle do? We'd potentially have to grade into the slope regardless, even if we didn't have to put a sidewalk to deal with that. And we wanted to make sure everyone was clear on that. So that orange hatch area is the site distance triangle and how much that would impact. But you can see what that's left with in this cross section. You're not left with much buffer at all. So that's our least preferred option. Oh, that's wrong. This is option B. Option B would be to connect the Greenway Trail that exists along Royal Oaks and just connect it into our existing community. And this is one option to do that. Again, you're left with a lot more trees in this scenario, but it doesn't account for future development to the north. But again, here's the site distance triangle. So it is carving a little bit out of the existing trees within the right-of-way. Again, we wanted to show that so that we're not selling you something that's not realistic. So we wanted to factor that in as well. And then the third option again, sorry, there's a typo at the top, but this is option C. And this is the option where we bring the path into the development. We would work out some sort of access, the developer would install the sidewalk, and then we would hand it over to the village through an access easement, and then they would take over responsibility of it from there. This scenario, and the reason they decided to go with concrete, a lot of it is because of the grades. So to bring it into the development, we're gonna have to exceed accessibility of 5% to be able to do that. But that allows us to save the trees. So they wanted it to be concrete because it won't erode away, whereas granite fines would be a maintenance issue. And so that's this option. This is not the final location, but it's something similar. It will follow the grade and then come out and exit on the northern end of the site. But you can see in this scenario, you're just left with the buffer. You may lose 10 to 15 feet of trees because of the site distance triangle, no matter what. That's what NCDOT is going to require of us. But you're still left with a sizable buffer, which is one of the goals of this submittal, is to maintain that rural character along Murdochsville Road and buffer it from the outside communities, and screen and help create some privacy for the Village Walk community. If you have any questions, maybe I can answer them at this time, or if you want me to just go through.
You can go ahead and we'll collect them, but it's good.
So the architectural distribution plan, again, this recaps it, what it is. One thing we also want to note is to talk about the configuration. So this is just a schematic, but the configuration, the number of units within each one of these different option areas and zones, the numbers would stay the same, but how they were laid out and how they would be distributed may change, because that would be a lot of that would be dependent on the homeowner. The home buyers would have some say on potential options they could choose from, but again, that would be managed through Travis, and he would make sure that we have this distribution that we're showing in this plan. Also to note, and we can add this in the plan as too, is that no two adjacent lots may feature the same architectural option, and that'll ensure that that everything is kind of unique and it feels like more like an old neighborhood, the reflection of the historic neighborhood and village. That's all what we're going for. And then these overflow parking areas, as Maria mentioned before, we are currently exceeding the requirements of 2 spaces per unit. We're 21 spaces over. That would account for visitors, and then people who would want to maybe go park down by the amenity area. But these parking areas would be, they're deep enough, these areas are deep enough where you'd potentially be able to head in parking, but we would want to kind of leave it up to the homeowners, and people would be able to park the way they wanted to, as long as they got off the street and they parked into these areas. But we wanted it to be pine straw areas. You very often see these throughout the village, areas for people to pull over and park in pine straw. So that we thought this was a good balance between providing that for you guys based off your feedback, but also have it be soft and not add to the impervious calculations for the stormwater ponds. And then additionally, supplemental landscape. We didn't submit any material on that, but we wanted to restart that conversation. The applicant is willing to plan in sufficient landscape as they deem it essential to this community. The top 2 photos are actually 2 photos of the cottages on May that they developed and built the homes as well. So you can get a sense of what it looks like. The density and like the dimensions of the streets may be different, but the level and quality of the neighborhood is very similar to this. And then I wanted to also put those 2 images that were in the previous slides this is kind of what the look and, that we were going for. And having, you know, landscape is important. It's gonna add to the neighborhood, and then planting back would be, something that we would be willing to work with you on, so. And that condition 14, that's the one that we wanted to kind of work through today and get your input on what you thought the best option was, and then maybe move forward with that as an updated condition, so.
Yeah, thank you for your
Questions?
presentation.
If you have questions of me or of Travis, yeah, anything you need clarification on, we'll be happy to assist.
Great, thank you, Trevor.
Yep.
And Travis for being here. Any questions at this point from members of the board for the applicant based on the additional material provided? So this does cover the items we had noted for additional information, parking, sidewalk access, architectural, general comment about protecting landscaping, and then detail about the plans and which number and size for the plans. Bill?
I just have one quick question. Relative to the pine straw areas that can be used for additional parking, are you contemplating any marking of those areas that says, oh, here's a parking area, or is that just, you just want to keep that as a part of the natural landscaping that people just know that, oh, it's pine straw, I can park there if I need to?
Yeah, I think we'd want to keep it unmarked. Unmarked. You know, those areas that I marked are not within lots, so,
Right.
you know, homeowners would not be able to, and homeowners actually, the way we're setting up the CCNRs, they won't be able to really do anything with the landscape. That'll be up to the responsibility of the HOA to handle all that, the maintenance and everything, so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The depth of those, are you saying they would be the depth that you could pull straight in?
Correct, yes. Yeah, they're 18 feet approximately, you know, at minimum 18 feet, which is the depth of the parking space according to code.
25 or so spots.
Yeah, I'd have, I guess I can look
Counted up around 25 parking spots that could
20 to 25.
add additionally.
And this would only be for overflow.
Right.
So they would, you know, the HOA would let residents know that, you know, not just use these, you know, to only really use them when there's overflow needed, so.
And so to refresh, this isn't a change in what you had shown before. We just asked, can you highlight additional on-street parking above and beyond? You know, there's actual on-street parking spots shown adjacent, and then, so
Exactly,
this
yeah.
wasn't a change from what you submitted before, you're just
No,
highlighting it for
yeah,
us.
the 21 additional spots were already there, beyond the required parking requirements. This is in addition to that.
We would just make sure in the landscape plan that those areas are protected for that use.
Yeah, that they're clear of any landscape that would restrict that.
Was the site triangle shown and the clearing for that shown previously, or is that a change for the access onto
So, yeah,
Murdochville?
what we submitted to Maria that you have in your packet doesn't show it, but we could update that. But it is something that we discussed with NCDOT after, and they gave us feedback on what that would be. We just wanted to come prepared to the meeting so that you understood that there is gonna have to be some clearing within the right-of-way to deal with that, according to NCDOT, what they would require of us. We just didn't have that meeting until after. We had it just this past week, so.
No, I'm, for one, appreciate you showing that. I think that's a pretty good level of detail, and honestly isn't always shown. So I think that we're in a curve there, which is clearly why it's such a long
Yeah,
site triangle.
Exactly, yeah.
I know we talked about the architectural, and you're showing these colors for different facade types. But even that there's even more variation basically than the colors show. So if you look just at red,
Yeah.
just for our eyes, that's still 3 different types.
Yep.
So it's, you saying you're going to note on there that no identical adjacent, but it really is going to vary even between those colors shown on the plans.
Yeah, I mean, very often, and Travis could explain better than I can, he's the designer of these homes, but, yeah, you may have one floor plan or a couple floor plans that are a certain width, but you can reskin them very differently. It's just, we wanted to reflect what historically you would see with those type of architectural styles. You wouldn't see a Queen Anne, well, you could see a Queen Anne that would be real wide and big, but we're wanting to keep it on the narrow side, and same thing with some of the other ones, the Craftsman style, and then, the Georgian Revival, you're gonna see that be much wider because that's how the architecture is, so. But yeah, it's a lot more varied than that, so.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, at this point, we don't have any other immediate questions for you, so you can return to your seats. We may call you back up after the public comment period, but thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Very much.
As we move into public comments, a few items for members of the public. We appreciate your input today. This is a legislative review. So our review of this is based on whether the applicant meets the criteria set forth in the ordinance. Anyone that's getting up to speak, note that this is a continuation of the public hearing we held in January. So we appreciate all comments, but we don't necessarily need to rehear the full things that we heard in January. So we appreciate highlighting anything and your ability to do that to keep us informed of your concerns and certainly for council. So first name on the list is Mary Flynn. Please come to the microphone and state your name and address. And
Mary Flynn, 137 Lark Drive. Well, I did not know the meeting would be canceled last night or last month, so since I was going on vacation, I wrote you something. So I need not reiterate that, I'm sure. The page 1 deals with the parking and the sidewalk. And the only thing I would want to say is that garages are made for cars. And I think the HOA ought to put in their bylaws that cars should be parked in the garage or must be parked in their garages. That will leave extra parking in their driveways for guests. The second page of that deals with the conditions, and you know that I am against granting any of the conditions. But as a resident of Royal Oak, I want you to be particularly thoughtful about the buffers that need to be put on the side of the driveway that faces, or the driveway is going to go right along the fence of Royal Oak. And what is there now are, well, tranquil backyards, heretofore tranquil backyards. We would like you to impose a decent-sized buffer zone, and if you can't do that, well, guess what? Maybe they can give us the money and we can put the buffer on our side, but we do need a buffer. We do need a buffer on that. I know things are fruitless on my part to even object to or talk about. I'm going to ask you these letters. I wrote this letter assuming that there was a tree survey completed, but unless I'm wrong, I requested one. I didn't find any tree survey. So on page 2 of that letter, under specific requests for board action, the first one should be, there's a little, you can write it in, obtain a tree inventory. a tree inventory, of course, it's not up right now, is in the developer's requirements. And so if they have not met that requirement, I don't see how anything can be done. And I don't even understand how they were able to submit plats without knowing the trees that are up there. There are 49 plus or minus old growth trees, and I mean huge. And I mapped out exactly where all of them are. And I see from what they've presented that some of them will be preserved, but not all of them. And those trees provide a view shed, and they provide a view shed from Royal Oak. So they are doing us a disservice also if they remove those old growth trees. They are specimen trees, and the application cannot be deemed complete without that tree survey. And I will finish. I won't waste your time. I know I'm here fruitlessly, but I'm going to fight anyway. The Constitution does not provide, the U.S. Constitution does not provide any real amendments regarding our environment because they didn't need to. They had the environment all around them. The Bible, I would think, supersedes the Constitution. And in the Bible, in very many places, there are scriptures that refer to the fact that God owns the world and everything in it, and especially our water, our trees, and our air. And we are here, he put us here to be his stewards, to take care, to represent him and represent his best interests. And I hope that we'll do that, even though the law is not in my favor, and I'm glad the developers are doing something. I hope they will do more, because I know I would not want to be on the wrong side of God's plans for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flynn. Any other public comments this evening? Anyone who didn't sign up? Yes, sir.
Jack Farrell, 21 Gray Abbey. Words of wisdom from the previous speaker is probably worth considering. I wanted to mention that I appreciate the effort that you've made on the conditional zoning to have a conditional zoning approach that in fact is good for the village and good for the developer at the same time. In particular, the sidewalk issue. Of the three options that were submitted, I think option C, which is the meandering path through the woods, if you will, that connects to Royal Oaks, is far and away the most attractive option for both the community and for the village. In addition, I think it really should be a concrete path. I agree with staff in that regards. We have a great deal of experience in the village maintaining trails, and trails that are gravel, sand, gravel, can be problematic, as a matter of fact, particularly with any type of slope. And concrete is far more easily managed on a day-to-day basis. It does have its problems, and there will have to be a careful agreement between the HOA and the village relative to maintaining it, because it will obviously both be on HOA property, common ground, and also potentially on the right-of-way at times. So that agreement will be necessary. But I think a concrete walkway connecting to Royal Oaks in a similar fashion, going through the trees, would be a very preferable option, and I strongly recommend that. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? Okay, we can leave the public hearing open. Continue to ask questions of the applicant. So I would ask the board, with the additional information that we've received, hearing from staff, the applicant, and now public comments, What other questions, comments do you have? And meanwhile, moving towards that great question in the sky, do we have enough information to make a motion? If not, do you need additional information or be thinking in your heads towards that motion? Bill?
This is for the applicant. I was interested to listen to the public
You guys
comments.
want to come back up?
And I was wondering if you have any comments regarding the tree inventory, tree survey, and/or buffering along the borders with adjoining development. Do you just have any thoughts about that?
So the tree survey, surveying the trees, you know, once we go into site plan submittal, any development, you have to go through that process of identifying trees. You would have to show what you're gonna clear, what you're gonna save. So we would go through it during that process. You would also have to go through a woodpecker study. That's a requirement of the village, which is currently ongoing. So this is stuff that we would have to go through, and that, you know, we know that that's part of the process, that this is initially just the preliminary rezoning side, but that we would go through that, as required by the village, so. And you know, as related to the buffers, you know, and I'm sure you guys understand this, the difference between the sublots and then the parent lot.
Right.
The buffers on the parent lot are according to code requirements. We're not asking for any conditions to change any of that. So there'll be a 10-foot buffer along Royal Oaks according to the code requirements, and that will be a substantial buffer to meet their landscape standards for that. So.
Thank you.
And the clarification on that buffer for the major property means that no clearing in that area that is the buffer, correct, on the perimeter?
I don't think, well, is that how you want to do it? Okay, so do we want to call it an undisturbed buffer?
Or clarify if there's a better way to clarify.
Okay, yeah, we can, undisturbed buffer, okay. If we want to change it to that, undisturbed buffer, because there is a difference.
We're talking the parent track, the
Correct.
10 feet between
Correct.
us and Royal Oaks, right? Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, not
Yes.
on the individual lots.
So,
you're proposing,
yeah, we would be willing to commit to that as an undisturbed buffer, which would be different. You know, there's the landscape buffer, which is what you have to landscape according to, and then there's whether it's an undisturbed buffer.
Correct.
Saying undisturbed? Yes. Okay, undisturbed buffer.
Well, that was not my intention, but that's a good question, so thank you for a good comment. Appreciate your offering that.
And that
for
would
board to
be
consider.
around, we were to look at this, the southern edge, the western edge, and then the northern edge, not this.
That's that. Correct.
With reference to the easement, I guess maybe staff speak to how that works? Is the easement given that covers just the sidewalk portion? Is it the right-of-way to the sidewalk? I know there's something similar in number 6. How
Yeah,
does that
so
get handled?
there's precedent there that we've applied with other areas. I'm obviously next door at the Royal Oak development, not to the extent that you see here, but in areas where, you know, if you want to preserve some mature trees, or if there's some utility conflicts, you know, fire hydrants, whatever other real-world example you can put on it, where the sidewalks need to meander on the private property. Another example is just right down the hill here next to the Greens Apartments. We can plat an easement at time of final platting. Typically, we get a public pedestrian easement, so it allows for any, you know, public pedestrian to use the sidewalk. And then we also get some sort of, on top of the access easement, a maintenance easement for whatever that maintenance will be. We do need to have a conversation about, you know, who should be maintaining the sidewalk. If it's just a village, DOT, if it were to be located in their right of way, they're not in the business of keeping up sidewalks. But we would need, there needs to be a maintenance easement that would also need to be granted, and typically that would be wider than the actual sidewalk, just for, you need to get outside of the 5-foot wide sidewalk for maintenance. So there's a means to execute it, it's just if
Great.
the village is amenable to it.
And yeah, to reiterate, we agree, option C is the best scenario. It's our preferred scenario. And it being concrete, we're fine with that as well.
So some of the other comments we made before, just to make sure we've checked all our boxes, architectural variation, unique character, is the board satisfied there? Any other questions or information on that? And then the additional parking, showing the on-street parking, pine straw type parking.
Clarifies the overflow. I mean, my initial concern is everything was centralized, and so it's given other options.
Okay. Staff, do we need to close the public hearing before we make a motion?
You don't have to, it's your choice.
Let's leave it open. Let's just stay in the public hearing.
Because I messed up the last motion, so.
It wasn't you, Bill, it was me.
Before we get too far into a motion, can we clarify the requested condition as submitted regarding the sidewalk? If the applicant is also stating that they believe the preferred option is option C, we probably need to modify or have that last condition modified before we have a motion.
So condition 14, Bill will be, it is 14, right? Okay. And then what do we, right now there's currently not a condition related to the overall site perimeter buffer.
10-foot undisturbed.
Yeah, would that be a modification or would that be an additional condition? What's the best way to handle that? Probably additional, because the only buffer conditions
Yeah,
on there is related to
I
the
think it
small
would be
lots.
an additional.
Yep, it would have to be an additional condition.
So for drafting purposes, if we reference to the sidewalk, it could be, in order to meet the requirement of providing a sidewalk along Murdocksville Road, the applicant will provide a sidewalk consistent with option C, and we can have the packet can speak to that. Knowing that we're not going to have a specific location nailed down, and of course, with the specifics that it be a concrete sidewalk meeting the village's standard.
Sure to note the material, because it's not noted on there currently. Okay. Well, I think you described it well, Trevor, as staff did last time. The conditional rezoning process is a give and take, so Travis and Trevor, appreciate both you guys highlighting that and being willing to come to the table with some offerings. Take your time.
We refer to
describe
it
it.
as the parent track.
Parent track.
Parent track.
If anyone is working on a motion, I tried to type something on your screen under option 14 regarding the sidewalk, and I'm happy to try to capture an additional one for the planted buffer.
And maybe just add into that, Alex, that it will be concrete.
I have the language there, meeting the village standard, that
Okay.
might be good enough, but we can be as specific or as we need to.
Right, because the village does allow varying types.
Term, and again, I just want to make sure I get this right, regarding the, not the interior house-to-house perimeters, but you used a term for when we were talking about the
Setback.
option C, or when we were talking about the buffers around that.
The undisturbed
Describe that.
buffer on the outsides.
Undisturbed buffer on the outside, which is outside of, and you had a term for it.
Yeah, yeah, so we're putting in something related to an undisturbed buffer, meaning you can't touch it. Whereas there's a landscape buffer that's a different definition within the code, yeah.
Bounds something.
Talking about what do you
parent-
call
the
the
parent
actual
track.
parent track? Is there another name? Because you have the internal parcels.
Oh, sublots, that's sublots.
Sublots are interior.
That's correct. And I
Yes.
want to avoid that, so I want to talk about,
We call it the parent track.
I think you would call it the parent track. Yep, I think that would definitely signify the overall.
So is the intent to provide a 10-foot, this 10-foot undisturbed buffer around the perimeter except for Murdocksville Road frontage? Is that what?
right,
Yep.
As a minimum, because obviously you're showing on the backside, right now you're showing a 20-foot buffer, so.
Right.
10-foot undisturbed, but then you have other landscape buffer, right?
This wouldn't change the need for a landscape buffer.
Okay.
Because it would, in my understanding, a landscape buffer is required regardless. Or do you have to, I guess?
Along certain areas, you're not required to buffer it against a more dense residential pattern to the south, for instance. And any of the existing vegetation that would be preserved can be used to meet any planting requirements. Plus, you can actually get additional credits for preserving more mature vegetation. If it helps, I'm trying to put something together here in front of you.
It's a race between you and Bill.
Happy for friendly edits there toward the conclusion of that condition. That's the one we're working on.
Ready for a motion? Make sure to use the microphone.
oh, it's over here, moved. I move the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval of the zoning map amendment to the Pinehurst Village Council and find that the proposed amendment is consistent with the 2019 Comprehensive Plan, accepting the conditions proposed, noting that for condition 14, the newly proposed option C, including concrete pathway, in the supplemental information that was provided, and adding the preservation of an undisturbed buffer around the parent tract, except along Murdochsville Road. These amendments are consistent with the comprehensive plan, and in particular guiding principles 2 and 3.
Motion by Bill. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ed. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote, starting from the left.
Aye.
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 Motion carries to approve with conditions. Thank you to the applicant and to staff for your work on this.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. At this point, we'll look for a motion from the board to exit the public hearing.
Move that we exit the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Bill, second by Les. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have exited the public hearing. Thank you to the applicant and to the public for your comments. Any other business for us today? Maria?
No other business today. Our next meeting is April 9th.
The 9th,
Yeah,
not the
not-
first Tuesday.
Yes,
Thursday.
that will be the second Thursday in April.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move that this meeting be adjourned until the second Tuesday in April.
Motion by Carol,
Second.
second by Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.